Somebody say cheese. Wildlife photographers and filmmakers, without a doubt, have one of the coolest jobs in the world. But it requires a lot of patience and luck to catch a rare animal in your lens, compared to, say, a landscape or a mountain. After all, mountains don't run away. But some animals don't run either. In fact, some photographers were lucky enough to encounter their dearest animal friends from up close, perhaps a little too close on occasion. Welcome to another episode of Forever Green. Today, we're bringing you. Some of these guys are like, hey there, what's going on? And others are like, you invade my space, I'll invade yours. And if you want to see an elk go head to head with a photographer, you'll definitely want to stick through to number 1. Number 7. Magic meerkats. Not all close encounters run the risk of being deadly and dangerous. Meerkats are naturally curious animals. If they weren't, they'd never find their prey that's buried underneath the ground. The animals have been studied for over 20 decades by scientists and documentarians, which means they're completely habituated to having photographers around. Some would even say they get a little too comfortable around us. Like these meerkats, who not only came incredibly close to those two wildlife cameramen, but even took some mid-afternoon shade just under their buttocks. Or this meerkat, who gave a wildlife photographer a little more than he bargained for, when it climbed onto his head and used him as a tall lookout post to scan for potential predators and look out for its young. Seems like a pretty fair deal, seeing as they make for some pretty cute stories. Number 6. Polar bear tries to break in. Polar bears are one of the most iconic animals on Earth, and yet we don't know so much about them. Scientists and filmmakers have never been able to get close enough to tell their intimate story and record details of their family life. But all that changed when wildlife cameraman Gordon Buchanan embarked on a dangerous mission to gain the trust of a family of polar bears. To study a wild polar bear from up close, Gordon set up a protective observatory cage just nearby a seal's breathing hole, hoping he could watch the predator hunt from up close. Unfortunately, the wild bear caught Gordon's scent and walked right past the hole and straight towards his box. Gordon was overwhelmed with fear as the predator tried to claw, bite, and break through the box to make a meal out of him. Thankfully, after realizing she couldn't get in, she gave up and decided to move on. Phew! Number 5. Lion sniffs cameraman's crotch. One minute you're taking a few photos of a lion pride from a safe distance, and next thing you know, a curious 300-pound lioness is so close, she's sniffing. It was just another day at the office for wildlife photographer Graham Springer when he encountered a pride of lions peacefully roaring in the early morning. He was carefully photographing the lion's morning ritual from under his car, while his colleague filmed from a distance and caught a dangerous encounter on camera. As the lions were moving off, the whole pride went around the back of his vehicle, but one particular lioness took a different route and came freakishly close. Graham did not have enough time to get into his car and had no choice but to stand still and wait out the lioness while she curiously investigated him and his camera gear. It was one of the most nerve-wracking moments of his life, he said, but he was glad the lioness didn't make breakfast out of him. Thought that was a close call? Wait until you see the photographer who literally went head-to-head with an elk. Before we move on, here's a quick challenge for you. If you can leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button, and turn on the notifications in less than 5 seconds, you will have 10 years of amazing luck. Hurry up and try it. It actually works. Number 4. Whale protects diver from shark. During a trip to look at whales in the Cook Islands in the South Pacific, researcher Nan Hauser had an encounter unlike any she had experienced before when a 40-ton humpback whale swam toward her. For 10 minutes, the massive creature nudged her forward with its closed mouth, tucked her under its pectoral fin, and even maneuvered her out of the water with its back. Hauser was frightened and unsure whether the whale was playing or trying to hurt her. She said she was prepared to lose her life and thought the whale would break her bones if it kept pushing her. Hauser's point of view footage shows just how persistently the whale was nudging her, until she finally made it out of the water and onto her boat. Bruised and scratched from the barnacles on the whale's skin, Hauser's fear turned into gratitude when she saw something she did not expect. She said she saw a tiger shark lurking closely behind the whale and concluded that the whale had been trying to save her life for the last 10 minutes. Number 3. Lioness snatches photographer's camera. 57-year-old bush explorer Barbara Jensen Vorster was taking pictures of a lion pride from her group's 4x4 in the Mashatu Game Reserve in Botswana. When a valuable piece of equipment fell out of the car and onto the ground. As soon as the photographer dropped her $2,500 camera, a protective lioness jumped up and moved towards the vehicle to inquire what had happened. She came so close, the exploration party had to retreat, but not without leaving behind a valuable prize. The lioness then snatched up Jensen's camera and telephoto lens in her mouth and carried it a distance before giving it to her cubs, who then pounced on their new toy and began playing with it. They dragged it through the dirt, chewed on the lens hood, and then fortunately, like most kids, soon grew tired with their new toy and left it behind. After retrieving her abandoned camera, Jensen found it was working perfectly aside from teeth marks across the surfaces. Because it was only aesthetic damage, she never had it repaired. Because, let's be honest, what photographer can show off that their lens had been inside a lion's mouth? Number 2. Cameraman smacked in the nuts by angry sheep. A BBC cameraman was headbutted in the balls by an angry sheep, and while it might not have been the content the creators were looking for, it was the content that went viral on the internet. The camera team had risked close proximity with lions, sharks, snow leopards, gorillas, and all kinds of other potentially dangerous animals, which is why they may have been a little too trusting of this Cameroon sheep named Cecil at an animal park. After introducing Cecil as one of the world's rarest sheep breeds, the park staff member went on to explain that allowing humans into their space had made these sheep a little too confident around people. Cecil, in fact, showed no fear as he rammed his head into the worker's leg, which should have acted as a warning for the cameraman. However, moments later, the cameraman kneeled onto the ground to get a closer shot of Cecil, and while at first he cautiously placed his hands in front of his groin, he eventually removed them, giving the sheep a straight shot. Cecil got right to it and whacked the man right between the legs, making him drop to the ground in pain. The attack was far from pleasant, though there's probably not many people out there who can say they've been rammed in the balls by a Cameroon sheep.
It's trying to headbutt me, bro.
Number 1. Elk headbutts photographer. It's important for wildlife photographers never to forget that wild animals are, after all, wild, and therefore dangerous. One photographer was reminded of this when he found himself head-to-head with a bull elk on the side of a road in the Cataloochee Valley of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The photographer was taking pictures from a respectful distance when the curious elk took notice and walked up to sniff his camera gear. All was going fine until the elk became more aggressive, lowering his antlers and full-on headbutting the poor photographer. The photographer hoped by being still and passive, the elk would move on, but when the animal lowered its antlers toward him, he kept his head down to protect his vitals, which the elk may have seen as a challenge. After minutes of continued headbutting, the park ranger turned up and relieved the photographer of his intense standoff with the bull elk. The photographer seems to have escaped with his sense of humor intact, when he said that at least the elk took him for a buck and not a cow. So what, if anything, is the lesson here? Probably to be careful and keep your head down. And that's it for today's video. Have you had a thrilling encounter with an animal before? Share your experiences in the comments below.